Thank you so much for joining us for this special webinar live from Israel on the front lines of medicine. We have for you today an exclusive conversation about the impact of the war through the lens of a neurologist. And Soroka, as you know, has been on the forefront of the medical response to the war in Israel. And our story is one of the most intense mass casualty medical responses that the world has experienced to date. So let's just take a moment. To have an overview of Soroka.
Wait, I think there's something wrong with the audio.
Okay.
Sorry, everyone.
You don't hear me?
No, there's an echo. Jay, do you hear an echo?
They hear me.
Sometimes, yes.
Oh, maybe it's you.
I closed mine. Sorry. I closed mine.
Okay.
If you hear an echo, just let us know.
Okay, so Soroka is located in Be'er Sheva. It is merely 22 miles from Gaza. It is one of Israel's most strategic institutions. It is the only level 1 trauma center in the entire Negev. It's a tertiary hospital. Its trauma center is the busiest in all of Israel under normal circumstances. Soroka, as you can see on the screen here, is the hospital affiliated with Ben Gurion University. We have 1,200 beds, and during the war that has expanded due to the need for additional ICU beds and rehabilitation beds. We're the largest employer in the Negev, and it is known for its centers of excellence that include world-class clinical research, oncology, neurology, of course, pediatrics, genetics, and an extremely active and prolific clinical research, amongst others. And it's also known as Israel's medical Iron Dome. So when war broke out on October 7th, it was a day that will be forever imprinted in our brains, because patients started to come into Soroka starting early in that morning with the most horrific injuries. And our team immediately fell into action very early. Our CEO, Shlomi Kodesh, called it a mass casualty, which allowed us to bring all the resources to bear as quickly as possible. And we treated approximately 680 patients in that one day, which is an average of one every 45 to 60 seconds. So the pace and the intensity of what was going on in that room as we triaged, as we had patients coming in through personal automobiles, through ambulances, through any way that they could get to the hospital and have Soroka immediately start working on them to save lives, was pretty amazing. So here's some views. These pictures here are some views of what it was like in the trauma room at that time. It was a rarity to have the ambulance landing, the helicopter landing, because of the situation, as you know. But you could see here how patients were coming in, moving very quickly, being transported directly. And often we were working on the patients even before they made it to the trauma room to make sure we could save lives. So some interesting things allowed Soroka to shine during this period that are unexpected. When you have such an stream of patients coming in very, very poor condition, lots of blood, lots of gore, and no one with them to identify them, we had a problem of how to identify the patients. And we used our high-tech tools because we're also known as, Israel 21C campus, where we use many, many tools of technology to advance our medical practice. Here we used it to identify patients. Another view of the trauma room, triage room. And thus we moved from that day to a pace of moving to ongoing. 10, 20, 30 wounded soldiers have arrived at Soroka's trauma room virtually every day since then. And it was punctuated by some really notable moments, such as the release of the hostages, when certain of the hostages amongst the most severely wounded were brought to Soroka. So this was an extremely important event for the Soroka team to be able to prepare for the arrival of the hostages, to create a welcoming, secure, and medically appropriate and embracing home for them to arrive to as they exited the horrors of being a hostage and transitioned back into health and recovery. So here are some of our favorite pictures, which could show you the journey of patients reuniting with their families on their road to recovery. And we don't have time to go through all of the stories right now. We just really wanted to give you a taste for this so that you can see the background to the story that Gal is about to tell you. But here is one of the highlight moments when one of the most severely ill of the hostages, a woman in her 80s, recovered at Soroka. And here she's in the presence of visiting dignitaries who you recognize. Okay, so all this comes to bear with, we earned a new logo for Soroka, and that is at the moment of truth, Soroka. Soroka was present and was a hero in the care of the victims of this war from day one and continues to. And as Gal will tell us, it was also very much front and center over this past weekend, when we had 12 admissions to Soroka following the attack from Iran. So yes, we earned this in the moment of truth, Soroka, and we are there for Soroka every day. And we thank you for your participation and support along the way. So now I will stop sharing my screen. Valerie?
Yeah.
And we're continuing to welcome people into the webinar. And I would now at this moment like to introduce Jay Selmam. Dr. Jay Selmam is a pediatric neurologist at Columbia University. He is also former president of the board of directors of American Friends of Soroka Medical Center and a current board member and co-chair of the Medical and Scientific Advisory Board of American Friends of Soroka. He will be leading Dr. Gal Ifergane in conversation as we dive into Soroka behind the scenes. And so I hope that now that we've shared some information with you, you're ready to appreciate fully what you're about to see and to prepare your questions. Again, questions can be submitted through chat. And Jay is going to introduce Gal. Following the conversation, we'll ask your questions and then we'll put it right to Jay right now. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you so much, Rachel, both for your wonderful leadership over the many years and especially over the past 6 months. This has been an unprecedented, there has been a very unprecedented response to the events of October 7th. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. and Professor Gal Ifergane, who has many titles, but now is currently the head of the Department of Neurology and the chairman of the Division of Brain Medicine. He and I are both allergic to long introductions. So, Gal, I'd just like to ask you first to share your thoughts and tell us what it was like living through the events of this weekend.
Actually, we've been preparing for this weekend for the last 10 days or something. We were told that there's going to be an Iranian attack, and maybe there will be, and maybe there won't be. And actually, every day it should have happened. And when we were told that the missiles are on the way, the drones are on the way, basically you had nothing to do. We are used to things that unfold quickly. You have a minute to get into a secure room when you hear the air raid siren. If you are in Beersheba, if you are next to the Gaza Strip, you have 15 seconds. A few hours is what we're going to do with that. And actually, there is nothing you can do. And there is nothing that you can actually affect what's happening. So the best policy is to go to sleep and get some sleep, because maybe in a few hours there'll be a siren, maybe your area will be hit, maybe we need to go to Soroka to assist and to treat casualties. But currently, there is nothing to be done. I mean, how many Twitter and Facebook memes you can read, how many speculations you can watch from talking heads on TV. Nobody knows what's going on. So we just went to sleep. We turned off the TV and went to sleep and woke up when there was an air raid siren, got into the safe room. My son, who lives in Beersheba and doesn't have a safe room, was sleeping over. My younger daughter was here with her boyfriend. We all got into our safe room, and the sounds were very impressive. It was longer and more aggressive than we are used to. And then it ended. And we got out and tried to get again some sleep. We didn't, but that's not because there was something to do. That just couldn't sleep. Those are events that you are helpless. There is nothing you can do. Probably nothing will happen to you. You cannot affect what's going on. Everything that is told on the news is usually speculations. Nothing is true. Most of it is just propaganda from here, propaganda from there, and fake news from all sorts. So just turn it off and get some hours of sleep.
So before this presentation, we had spoken, and it would be interesting to get your perspective on what October 7th was like. We saw the images that Rachel shared, but you were there, your colleagues were there. If you could share some of your thoughts about that, and then I know you had some thoughts that you put down on paper after that, after the immediate events were over.
Well, I'm a neurologist, as you know, and neurologists don't have much to do in mass events, mass casualties events. There is not much neurology there. There are no strokes, no epilepsy. Neurosurgeons treat brain trauma. Intensive care physicians treat the most severe casualties. Orthopedic surgeons treat bones. And neurologists don't really have anything to do during the event. So when the event started, 6:30 in the morning, we heard the sirens. My daughter was home my younger daughter was discharged 2 weeks ago from the army. And in this specific Shabbat, on October 7th, she was on vacation at home. Lucky for her, because she was serving in Nachal Oz. And after the missiles gave us a few minutes to think, and my wife and my wife is a social worker and is head of the social working service of the psychiatry department in Soroka. So we just took the cars and went to the hospital. I tried to make 3 beds at my department because you don't really, this day you probably need every bed you can get. So neurological beds can serve as general beds. And my wife went to support those who were brought to the hospital. She's the real hero, by the way, not me. And then at a certain point, where I found my daughter came to the hospital because she was looking for someone alive from her unit, from her base. So someone that can tell her what happened to her friends. And she asked me to take her to emergency department to assist her in entering, and just went through the beds looking for someone she knows. She only found one and heard the stories. The emergency department looked like you would expect hell to look. Overcrowded, casualties of all sorts, family members looking for their loved ones, injured people looking for their spouse, their friend, their families. And it lasted like that for about a day. Soroka is doing, like every other hospital in Israel, is prepared for mass casualties events, and we are being, and we have drills that are done by the Ministry of Health and the IDF. And they are drilling the hospitals in how to respond to mass events. When they feel aggressive, they bring us 100 fake casualties for training, and let's see how you manage with 100 casualties. That's a mass event. And 100 started the day. And so it wasn't like anything you've ever seen or ever experienced. You probably remember that on September 11, the hospitals in New York didn't have any burden. There weren't a lot of casualties coming to the emergency departments. Everybody died. And that's one of the largest events, and definitely one of the horrifying ones that any of us have seen, that anyone have seen. That's October 7th. And October 7th, for me, I was just a physician who's vacating beds and who supports his family who's in the events. Our work, the neurologist work, started only afterwards. Because once the acute events finished, we found ourselves when we cannot perform endovascular treatments. The cath lab, the brain cath lab, was closed by the IDF because it's not protected. We're not protected enough, and it wasn't allowed to perform procedures there, meaning that we had to find somewhere to transfer every acute stroke patient. We found ourselves in a reality where there are no ICU beds for our patients because all of them are taken by soldiers who naturally take precedence. And we found ourselves in a reality in which you don't have any rehabilitation beds to send the neurological patients. And it makes you deal with all the very severe cases that you usually treat in an ICU. And on the other hand, you have nowhere to discharge your patients who need rehabilitation. And we passed a few months in which we were overcrowded, fighting for every patient just to find him a bed. And when we started again doing endovascular procedures, then you need a bed for everyone, and the ICU is not available. And while you do that, my department is just next to the helipad, and the helipads and the helicopters are just going up and down, and with every chopper you see just next to you, you know exactly what you're getting. And you know that here's someone whose life will never be the same, even if he will be rescued, if he will stay alive. And they were just landing in pairs and 3 helicopters at once. And there are smaller helicopters and larger helicopters, and the larger ones carry a few casualties, and it just goes on and on. At a certain point, we were started to be busy in declaring brain death for soldiers whose brain has died and could donate organs. And it was done again and again, and while usually people are not very enthusiastic in donating organs in the Negev, and most of the soldiers who died, their families were very positive in donating organs and saving lives. And those were the last lives they saved after maybe saving their friend's life and by being injured. And here there were more lives to save. And that was another job of the neurologist. Now, one of the interesting aspects is looking not from the hospitalization department, but in the clinic about the patients that we've got. You must remember that for all the kibbutzim and moshavim and Sderot and Netivot and Ofakim, Be'er Sheva is the large city. And we have many friends there. Many friends, many colleagues. And they were all either caught in the event and were injured or died or kidnapped. And those who didn't were evacuated to other areas. Now, and many of them, I didn't know where they are and what happened to them. And I decided for myself on October 9th, I decided that all those that I don't know that are alive, they are probably dead, all of them. And in myself, I mourned them all on October 9th. And then I had wonderful days after that, in which every day someone turned out to be alive. And he was just not answering his phone or was evacuated somewhere. And every day I met another one. And it's a very happy thing to meet someone that you were sure that was dead. But I just couldn't stand the fact that I was looking for it. And then we started to see patients who were evacuated, whose life were affected by the events. Someone asked you, how does the brain cope with the trauma? Brain copes with trauma, but as we all know, most people can experience extreme trauma. It will be terrible. It will change them forever, but they will remain functional. There will be no pathological process. Only a few of us will develop will develop post-traumatic stress disorder or severe disabilities. Most of us, most of the people, after experiencing the most terrible traumas there are in humanity, people tend to go back to their lives. They don't forget it. They never forget it. It changes them forever. But they go back to everyday lives. Life is more powerful than everything. But you saw people in the clinic that the changes that they experienced, the events that they experienced, were life-shattering. For example, I've seen a patient who during the last 2 or 3 months, he became demented. He wasn't remembering things, he got lost, he didn't know where to go. And it was a 70-something-year-old man who was active, working in his business that now is run by his kids. But since he was evacuated from Sderot, he rapidly developed dementia. Now, he had early process of Alzheimer's disease even earlier, probably. But when you are not in your normal place and you don't sleep in your bed and everything changes, you decompensate. You decompensate. Now, every patient has something that has to do with October 7th. Every single patient. And one of the clinical questions that you ask in an office visit is, where were you on October 7th? And then people tell the stories and how they are related. In some, they just need to tell it. In others, their complaints are connected to the events in some way. One of the things that we currently see, are people who had mild traumatic brain injury or just a concussion or a blast exposure on October 7th or during the battles afterwards. And perfectly normal. Now, I see them because I'm a headache specialist and I see patients with a headache. But actually, they come with a full post-concussion syndrome picture, with cognitive impairment, with disorders of concentration, and word-finding difficulties. They have insomnia, they have headaches, they have dizziness. And of course, they also have psychiatric manifestations, depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder. Usually, in the US, the awareness to that developed in the military during freedom period. Israelis, we were not massively exposed to such blast events, and we see it now everywhere. And you just open the clinic and you see someone like that, and they think that everything is psychiatric because we all know, we're all familiar with PTSD. We can relate to symptoms that are of such horrifying events that are mental. But the exposure to blast, the exposure to mild head injuries is immense. And we see that all the time. And we're trying to put that into something more structured so people with that can get specific care. Question, anyone?
So, what kinds of changes did Soroka make in terms of preparedness and readiness for another mass casualty event on the scale of October 7th, rather than the prior preparations for 100 or so patients at a time?
Well, what happens when there's something surprising is that a few days later, you're very prepared to what already happened. We are always ready to the previous war. So we are more prepared. We're more prepared, let's say, it's a cognitive issue to even imagine that such events can happen. We never thought that something like that is possible. And now we know it is. And if it's possible, you are mentally prepared for that, and you have all your procedures in place, and you have all your mental preparation for that, that something like that can occur. Basically, there is no physical preparation. I mean, okay, there were, let's say, 680 casualties, and okay, we'll prepare for that, and what will happen if there will be 1,000? If there will be 200? There's no end to that. You can prepare for 20,000 casualties, and then there will be 30. There's no way you can prepare. You can just have the fundamentals. Your teams should know what to do. And from there on, it's a matter of leadership. It's a matter of organization. It's a matter of initiative of staff members. And you just do the best you can. There is no way that someone can be prepared or to treat well so many patients, so many casualties at once. The care will always be suboptimal because, by definition, a mass casualties event is when you have more casualties than you can treat. That's what makes it a mass casualty event. And the preparation is mostly mental. And I think every Israeli has made the switch very quickly on October 7th evening. From the time we understood what happened. We all know that it can happen. And if it can happen, then you already made the first step in being prepared.
Thank you. So if you could step back and I know it's doesn't lend itself to an easy answer, but how did the staff, everybody from the heads of departments down to nurses to the people that take care of the facilities, how have things changed for them following October 7th? Obviously, some of them had losses, but what changes do you sense?
First of all, if you might ask yourself, how does a hospital inside the wall, how does it look like? What are the sights? How is it? What's the feeling? How does it look? And you know what? Exactly the same. It looks exactly the same. There are choppers, there are families around, there are more people in uniform than usually. But besides that, it looks exactly the same. There is no parking spaces in the parking lot. The cafeteria looks the same, serves the same food. Everything looks the same. And for the staff, for most of the staff, there are many personal challenges, but the work is basically the same. Because we are all, every one of us, lost someone or have a loved one that is injured or kidnapped or whatever, or has a family member that was killed in the event. Everybody, almost everybody. The scale is so high that everyone has something. Almost everyone in Israel, but in the south, then it's everyone. We all know people who were kidnapped, who died, who were injured. And being at my age, so I know many people that their kids got injured or died afterwards during the war. And So there are the personal struggles that and every one of us had, but the work is the same. One of my nursing staff in my department, his brother died on October 7th, and he said Shiva. And afterwards, he came to work. What was interesting was the relation between the Jewish and the Arab staff. Because in Soroka, we have a lot of Arab staff, nursing, medical. Some of them are Arabs from the north, some of them are Bedouins from the region. And in every escalation, in every military operation, you have to work very hard to keep it together. It's a challenge. Now, it was very easy. It was very easy. Bedouins were influenced by the October 7th as well. One of the physicians in my department, the Bedouin physician, that was a resident, some of her family members were kidnapped. Some were killed. Some were killed by missiles or injured by missiles. And basically, most of the Arab staff were embarrassed. They felt ashamed that something like that can happen, or the brutality of the event. Even those with very strong political opinions. When I went to Miluim a few days after October 7th, a few of the Arab nurses called my wife to ask if she needs help while I'm away, if there's anything they can do. So it worked. There were a few who were militant on both sides, mostly Arabs, but only a few. And usually most of the Arab physicians and nurses and other staff members just hushed them down. Somehow there was a brotherhood of fate, as in the early days, because we were all on the front line, we all were involved in the same way. And a good thing that we managed to do that. But basically, nothing is different. It's the same, but harder.
How, a lot of people here and around the world are wondering, how can we help? How can we support Soroka? We know obviously the financial support is critical. Our wishes and sharing our thoughts are critical, but are there other ways that either medical or non-medical personnel can help support Soroka and its mission?
Sometimes the hardest thing to do is not to do nothing, is to do nothing. It's always easier to do something than to do nothing. But sometimes there is nothing to be done. Now, we don't need currently extra staff members for short periods of time. If you will come to assist, you're probably not very good in emergency department. And in pediatric neurology, okay, you will see some patients and then who's going to do the follow-up? So there's actually no need for that. Those who are coming for long periods of time or that are making Aliyah can really help, can join the staff and help. But it takes time. What is happening now is that all of us in the medical community, we feel very isolated. I don't know how much you are aware to that, but in the international medical community and academic community, we are not accepted as we used to. Journals are sending back articles. Papers are not accepted for presentations. Doing shared research or research budgets. Israelis are not considered the most welcome. When you read things on Twitter, then I must say, I never experienced such anti-Semitic texts in my life. I didn't know that people still talk this way. Maybe you are exposed to it more than I do. I live in Israel. I'm not, but everything is blunt and on the table. What happens in the universities in the US, we are exposed to it, and it affects every one of us. Anyone is in his own community can help by making the connections, by speaking up, by helping us to communicate with colleagues, with journals, with whatever, everyone, what he can do. Because I think the biggest fight now is being fought in the minds of people. And the way we are perceived is, I mean, we feel very much alone in the world. Very much. And everything that can help us in this aspect. And of course, I'm not going to ruin it for Shlomi Kudish. Money is very important. But connections and people's minds and the way that we are perceived and connected is important, and every help will be welcomed. By the way, in the US, it's less difficult than in Europe. The British are the worst. Italians are terrible. In the US, it depends. I mean, we are not into philosophy or it's medicine. It's not the faculties that are more anti-Israeli. But still, even in medicine, it's not easy. And the connections and speaking up and events such as this, in which we talk to people, everything can be multiplied by everyone here speaking up in his own community, in his own echo chamber on social media. If he writes somewhere, everyone makes an influence. And that's the biggest help, I think, now.
Thank you so much for sharing this. We wanted to leave some time for questions, and I believe Rachel is going to moderate the questions. So thank you again for all the work and leadership you do there, and for all the work that Soroka does, and we look forward to working together. So I'm going to turn it back to Rachel.
Okay, thank you. Gal, I just want to say one thing. You are not alone. You are not alone. And right now you have the full attention of everyone in the American Friends of Soroka community, which extends far and wide. And we're going to do our utmost through our Medical and Scientific Advisory Council to counter those forces that you've observed, and to make sure that you and the scientists and physicians of Soroka and of Israel have a voice that is heard. So one of the delightful participants and facts about this webinar today is that it was initiated through the young leadership of Soroka Friends. And we're very proud to have Emma Rodney on our team as a rising resident in neurology. She's about to graduate from medical school. She'll from Hofstra/Northwell, and she has a question for you also. So Emma, if you'd like to say a word, and then after Emma's question, we will come back and take more questions from the chat. But we are so, again, excited to be able to spread the Soroka Friends community to extend to young physicians and young, practitioners who will be part of our story. So thank you. Oh, Emma, I'm going to unmute you.
Yep, I got it, Rachel. Thank
Okay.
you. I know you spoke a little bit about what happened on October 7th. I was wondering how your job and role has changed since October 7th, and if there have been any initiatives put in place that address the intersection of neurology and trauma related to the war.
Well, as I said, the challenges that were related to the war afterwards is one, operating a modern neurology department when you don't have access to ICU beds and you have to do your ICU by yourself. You don't have enough access to rehabilitation because rehabilitation is filled with injured soldiers. And you have to work in between from the most severe patients to operating healthcare professionals in what is not our discipline. We are not rehabilitation physicians. And finding places for the casualties, that's one. The other issue is the post-concussion syndrome that we've seen more and more patients. Currently, there is no specific program. There should be, let's say, a rehabilitation program for them, but those are not the severe ones. The system is filled with amputees and people with very severe injuries, and those with the mild traumatic brain injury who have normal scans and lost consciousness for a minute, but then regained it and are coping with many symptoms. Those do not enter the programs. They don't, no one even knows they need it. And sometimes they feel ashamed that they do because their friend lost his leg. And all that happened to me was I lost consciousness for a minute and everything's okay. So what am I complaining about? And those have to do in outpatient programs. And sometimes it's even enough just to say, that's what you're having. You're not mad. That's how it goes. It's okay. That's how we work on that. So it's not a program yet because things are unfolding as we see it. But that's what we do.
Thank you, Emma. We have a question about some of the severely wounded soldiers who are coming in unconscious. Okay, and they're in critical care and they might take some time to come out of consciousness, to regain consciousness. Are you involved with those and your team involved with those patients from the get-go, or do you wait for the different stages of recovery to step in?
No, those who are managing them are the neurosurgeons. Okay. Those are the professionals treating them in the ICU and the ICU specialists. We come into those events when there are seizures that need to be treated, when there is blood supply issues, and of course when there is brain death, like I said earlier. But we're mostly not the team that works with those patients. And when they regain consciousness and there's something to do with them, it's what we try is to make them transfer to rehabilitation, to the rehabilitation program, which was expanded in the hospital, but serves mostly soldiers, as it should be.
Mhm. Then someone else is asking about how long can you continue to have improvement when you've had a brain injury, like a closed, some kind of severe trauma? How long does the recovery process last? Like, is there hope that you can continue to improve over weeks, months, years?
When a patient if someone is unconscious because, let's say, he had a cardiac arrest and he's in the ICU now and he's not recovering, then if he's not recovering in relatively short period of time, let's say 2 weeks, he will not recover. On traumatic brain injury, it's very different. When there is a diffuse axonal injury, which is a widespread damage to neurons, you can see patients improving, regaining consciousness, even after months. So, where there's hope, there's life. And it can take a very long period of time, but things improve. And even if someone regains consciousness and he's severely impaired, the wonders that happen through a rehabilitation in some of the cases seems like magic, and it's not magic. It's just the healing process of the brain and the wonderful people that work with them. But things takes time. In traumatic brain injury, you should not lose hope so quickly.
That's a great message. Okay, well,
That's good for life, for everything, but specifically here.
mhm. Wonderful. Well, we want to thank you very much. There are no further questions right now. So I don't know if you have anything that you want to say to conclude or your final statement, but our final statement here is we thank you so much for the amazing job that you're doing at Soroka. And we will be sharing a link to this webinar soon so that you can all share it. Everyone who's participated in it today can now share it with your networks. And we will, again, keep in touch and bring you back anytime you'd like. This was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank all of you for watching. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone. And again, we're at Soroka Friends. You can reach out to us anytime for any questions you have about ways to support. And for those of you who are in the New York area, we would like to let you know that we're having an in-person fundraiser gathering on June 4th. And we warmly invite you to connect and find out about that. Take good care, everyone. Bye-bye.